Explain like I'm 5. The Manhattan Project required unprecedented computational power, but in the end the bomb seems mechanically simple. What were they figuring out with all those extensive, precise calculations, and why was they needed make the bomb work? This applies to not just the Manhattan Project but pretty much any invention or making anything. It takes a lot more work to try and figure out how to make something than it generally does to actually make the thing. For example, imagine you have no idea how to make a cake but you've had one and so you want to try to figure out how to make it but you can't look up recipes for cake. It would take a ton of effort to figure out the basic ingredients, the proportions of each, and the cooking parameters. Now imagine you've never even had cake but someone told you it was theoretically possible for cake to exist and you had to figure out how to make it. In the end it's just flour, sugar, fat, baking powder, eggs, vanilla and water, milk. Etc. But who knows how many terrible cakes you would have to make to figure that out. Now imagine if some of those terrible cakes had the chance of blowing up an entire city if you made it wrong? Best to figure out the physics of cake making and do the work computationally by mathematically modeling everything until you're pretty sure the candle on Tommy's birthday cake isn't going to be the fuse that takes your city off the map. It's for a birthday party, not a gender reveal after all. Just to show the scale of time required for humans to develop something like cake purely by trial and error and inventing, refining the necessary ingredients. The earliest records of bread are from like 14,000 years ago. Cake wasn't invented until about 400 years ago. Quick Google search, could be wrong. It's also worth nothing that the field of nuclear physics as a whole was in its infancy to the point that what they were doing was still considered a branch of chemistry rather than physics. To stretch the analogy, these people were at the top of their field in making salads, and they know that baking required some kind of fundamental change that salads don't, but the tools they were starting out with were limited. They knew you could cook eggs. Milk eventually goes bad. And someone had written a paper 20 years earlier about the mathematical possibility of the existence of sugar. There was a lot more than just the bomb. They also needed to produce the material for the bomb, which had never been done before. No one had created a continuous chain reaction with fissile material before, which they did. Then they had to figure out how to do that in an actual reactor to process the material for the bomb. It was a completely new field of science. The scientists themselves got the math wrong for what they needed in the reactor. The contractor that built the reactor decided to play it safe and build more than what was needed, which helped save the project, or at least avoid costly delays. And they didn't even have specialists to operate it. They pulled highly qualified chemists from a different company figuring they could learn what they needed to make it all work. Doubling on U. Stanater's comment, the Hiroshima bomb was mechanically simple, in the sense that a critical mass was assembled by the brute force ramming of two sub-critical masses together. But even at the speed those bits were slammed together, fission began before they impacted and it was a very inefficient bomb. But it was so simple, the design was never even fully tested. The world's first nuclear explosion was the Trinity test, which was a full test of the much more complex and efficient implosion weapon. With the implosion weapon, nobody had used explosives to assemble something before, with such remarkable control and precision. But I don't know that there were tons of computer calculations used on the explosive lenses that did that. A lot of trial and error and high-speed X-rays of materials being collapsed with explosives was certainly done though. It had a big chemistry element, different layers burning at different speeds to all coalesce into a sort of spherical wave. And, as others have pointed out, things like the way the chain reaction would propagate had to be modeled and simulated for many iterations of fission events. This was done on primitive, by today's standards, equipment, with rooms full of, usually, women making endless punch cards for programming and so on, and even the massive vacuum tube computers of the time were slow calculators by modern standards. If this stuff interests you, Richard Rhodes, Making of the Atomic Bomb, is a remarkably good read, National Book Award and Pulitzer winner. It goes through the science and history and personalities in a really engaging way, and ends with a profoundly philosophical overview of the evolution of war, and the demographics of the war dead. His follow-up on the hydrogen bomb is equally absorbing.